all of a sudden there's a chance that James Franklin and Penn State could lose one of their recent class of 2025 commitments.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. Help me welcome back recruiting insider and editor over at Penn State Rivals. That is Dylan Callaghan-Croley. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're talking about Penn State recruiting, as there have been some recent updates that concern the Nittany Lions. An Ohio State decommitment, an Ohio State offer to a Penn State commitment, and we're going to try to figure out where the class of 2025 stands with all of this. Let's start with the offer that Ohio State made and not the decommitment. We'll actually get to that, and some people know what I'm referring to. This has to do with Chaz Coleman and Zahir Mathis, Dylan. I want to start with Chaz Coleman. Underrated prospect across the board. He didn't have a Division I offer until Ole Miss in August, and they offered him as a tight end. Penn State offered him in September as an edge defender. Then he visited for the whiteout. He was sold, announced his commitment. This is another underrated prospect with star potential if he develops properly. But then Ohio State picked up on everything. The key thing here is, Dylan, he's from the state of Ohio. He is an Ohio native, so this is going to mean something to him personally. Dylan, what are the chances that Penn State is able to hold on to this commitment for Chaz Coleman?
I think there's a chance, but it's going to be really tough, I think, to hold on to Coleman just on paper. I mean, this offer came to Coleman about an hour before we went live. So, I mean, this is all still pretty new on our end here. No inside information as of just yet, but just, on paper, this is going to be a really hard one for Penn State to hold on to. Anytime an Ohio State comes around and offers an in-state prospect like Coleman, it's, one that those Ohio prospects usually, take a pretty long look at and consider. There's a couple cases where
they should,
where perhaps they have not gone the way of Ohio State. They offered Drew late in his cycle. And that didn't work out for Ohio State, but
nope.
But in many other cases it has for Ohio State.
But thank goodness they have Devin Brown, right?
Right.
In the case of Aller.
As I like to say, Ohio State has right to first refusal for Ohio prospects, since they all seemingly are pretty pretty big fans of the Buckeyes growing up. It's not like Pennsylvania, where everybody's not necessarily a fan of Penn State. Most people who grew up in Ohio are fans of Ohio State, and that goes a long way.
Fair.
It's gonna be tough, I think, for Penn State to hold on to this commitment. Don't think it's I don't think we should be saying goodbye just yet, but should be preparing, I think, for a potential decommitment down the road.
Okay, so the impact of this potential loss. This is a big deal because Penn State wants the commitment, and there's going to be a total overhaul at defensive line because of natural attrition of college football. 6-year veterans, guys that are they're going to the NFL. Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton. No, that isn't a guarantee, but the way that they're playing football this season basically makes it all but a guarantee at this point. So there are wide open spots across the board at defensive end, at defensive tackle. So any defensive line prospects that Penn State has been able to secure over 2024 and now the 2025 cycle. So I do view Chaz Coleman as a big deal if they happen to lose this commitment. But is it the end of the world? I'm guessing is what I'm asking, Dylan.
I don't think it's the end of the world, but I mean, there's a ton of upside with Coleman. I think he could potentially have the most upside of any of the defensive linemen they've recruited this class, just based off his raw potential.
That's saying something.
But at the same time, it's very similar to the guy who just decommitted from Ohio State, Zahir Mathis. His best football is probably not, in 2025, 2026. You're probably looking at 2027, 2028. or even a fifth year where he really emerges as a player. So in one end, it would be a pretty tough loss. On the other end, it's not going to be the end of the world. But yeah, definitely one that I think Penn State would love to, keep hold of here going forward. And one can argue with the last few years, Penn State's been better at producing defensive linemen and defensive ends than Ohio State. It's been a while since the Buckeyes have been producing, number one pick over number one pick. But I mean, I would take Abdul Carter and deny Dennis Sutton right now over JTT and Jack Sawyer over there at Ohio State.
I like that. And that's not really a hot take. I've said that they are 1A and 1B, depending on who you ask, at the top of the Big Ten and maybe even in the country right now. Don't get me wrong. I think JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are potential first-round picks, but so are Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton. And remember, they just sent off Adisa Isaac and Chop Robinson, who was a first-round pick not too long ago. Let's go back to this class of 2025. And remember, Max Granville was supposed to be in this 2025 class, but reclassified, joined Penn State early to get a head start on his development. But this is why it is not the end of the world that they happen to lose Chaz Coleman, because they have Jaden Woods, who's one of the top prospects in this class. LeVar Arrington II could play linebacker, could play defensive end, right? He's a front seven defender. Deshaun Burnett, same situation. Cortez Harris, same situation. And then they have two defensive tackles in this class as well. So Penn State is loaded, to say the least, at defensive line for not only 2025, but going back to 24 as well. Now let's address Zahir Mathis, because I caught a little bit of controversy, some flack for saying, hey, Deion Barnes and Penn State are going to be all over this, right? Why would they want to pass up on an in-state target that they had worked so hard to flip the first time around? He's a free agent now. He's decommitted from Ohio State. But Dylan, you're telling me the same thing that some other social media comments are, is that Penn State is over recruiting Zahir Mathis. And I don't get it. I can't, especially with now Chaz Coleman potentially going to Ohio State. Why not try to secure one of the best overall prospects in the state of Pennsylvania for the 2025 cycle, especially when there is still a need at defensive line, even with all the prospects that you have?
I wouldn't say they're necessarily over it, but it definitely has not. The communication between the two sides has not been as strong as it was perhaps from June to October. Things have quieted down on Penn State's side, and I think other programs are getting involved elsewhere from around the country as well. I mean, we saw him just take an official visit a couple weeks ago to Ohio State. He decommits a few weeks later now. I don't think Ohio State necessarily fought tooth and nail to keep that commitment either, which I think tells you a lot. I mean, Zahir Mathis is a good player, but Zahir Mathis is also a guy that I think, like I said a couple minutes ago, his best football isn't. I mean, this is a far from a finished prospect. He's got a lot of work to do in his game, and I've watched a lot of tape of his over the years, and he's always flashed, but he's never been overly dominant. So I think that's something that stands out to me as well. He's a good player. He has a chance to be a good player somewhere, no matter where he ends up. But I think when you consider some of the circumstances, this recruitment for Penn State has always kind of been weird, up and down. I wouldn't be surprised to see some big bags thrown at him from SEC schools or other programs.
Colorado.
I mean, because there are programs out there who may not necessarily have great records right now, may never have great records, but have money to play around with and are willing to go out and try to land a big fish like Mathis. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. Colorado, no inside information there, but yeah, a school like Colorado,
it's a possibility.
Always trying to make a splash is a good example. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Mathis. I'm not going to rule Penn State out in this one, but if I'm betting, Penn State, Ohio State, or the field right now, I'm betting the field for Mathis.
Rivals has him as a consensus 4-star, top 60 player, 55th overall. Number 2 as an edge defender, number 1 prospect in the state of Pennsylvania. So he is still highly touted, even though it would probably be a long-term developmental plan for Zahir Mathis. But that's never stopped Penn State before. So we'll see. But I think that's an interesting update, that somebody that they had worked so hard to try to get to flip away from Ohio State is now available, is now decommitted, and everything's kind of settled when it comes to the recruiting conversations there. But the class of 2025, as you mentioned, the early signing period is very close, just a couple of weeks away. And Penn State's got to work hard to make sure they keep those commitments, that they're able to maybe add some other ones. So we'll talk about how the class of 2025 is shaping up on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by Skylight Frames. Do your loved ones live far away, but you wish they were close to you this holiday season? We've got the perfect gift for you. It's Skylight Frame. A Skylight Frame is a touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds, and there is seamless sharing. You can invite your friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or an email, and there's no account or subscription required. You can add new photos straight from your phone, from anywhere. It only takes one tap on your phone to send new photos to the frame across the country. It's the fastest and easiest way to keep your loved ones in the loop, and they'll feel so much more connected to you. Satisfaction is guaranteed. We're confident that you'll love Skylight. We offer free 120-day returns, and it's a top-rated brand. Over 1 million happy customers, thousands of 5-star reviews, and available in over 30 countries. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/college. That's skylightframe.com/college. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/college. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, and it's all on the same page where you place your bets. It's that convenient, it's that simple. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if we look over at FanDuel.com, lines are available for Penn State at Minnesota. Penn State is now an 11.5-point favorite. The line is trending towards the Golden Gophers. Minus 520 on the money line for Penn State, plus 385 for the money line for Minnesota. The total is still set at 45.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, Dylan, let's pick back up with potential flips, the way that Penn State could boost this class of 2025 as opposed to playing damage control, because I think that Penn State's current group of commitments is very secure, but we'll address that to wrap up the segment. I think the potential lies in the fact that Penn State could maybe pick up, 2 or 3 other prospects if they play their cards right. So the one that everybody is looking at, or at least should be looking at, is Andrew Olish of Michigan. Penn State has shown that they have turned into tight end university. Ty Howell and this coaching staff collectively continue to crank out tight end prospect after tight end prospect, going back to Mike Gesicki, honestly, even to Jesse James. But I know that was the transition from Bill O'Brien to James Franklin, but then Mike Gesicki, and then most recently a Theo Johnson, a Brenton Strange, and now you have Tyler Warren, who is in Heisman contention. So Andrew Olish, one of the top overall prospects in the state of Pennsylvania, a tight end. James Franklin made somewhat of a reference to him in a recent press conference. He's been committed to Michigan, but he's been visiting around. Is it Penn State? Is it Oregon? Or is Michigan going to land him in the early signing period?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really close between those three. Notre Dame is also in the mix there.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, Penn State's become tight end U kind of over the last few years. The only other school I think that really has that claim to fame right now is probably Iowa.
Yeah.
But yeah, Olish, Penn State continues to work on Olish. Also, James Franklin made that kind of public plea to him during his press conference on Monday without obviously naming him. But yeah, Penn State's focus, I would say, definitely on Olish more than anybody else at this point. They believe he can be a game changer for them, and it's hard to argue against that. I think that Oregon visit, which is coming up, is going to be an interesting one for him. That could definitely change a lot in that recruitment. But yeah, I think Penn State's still in a good spot to potentially get that flip done. But it's far from a sure thing at this point as well.
We're going to go a little more rapid fire here because I don't have as much confidence in these potential flips. I kind of did originally with names like Lex Cyrus, Bradley Gompers. Matt Zollers was more of the long shot there. Missouri seems to really have him sold. Of course, he's already he's advertised some of the NIL deals and everything else. So Matt Zoller seems to be set here, even though he visited for that Penn State Ohio State game. But a little more rapid fire here. Bradley Gompers, linebacker who's committed to Duke, was interested in Penn State, was interested in Michigan down the stretch here. And then Lex Cyrus, who's always either been South Carolina or Penn State. There were kind of some rumors that maybe he flips and joins this Penn State class. Any of those three? Do you have any confidence that Penn State could land any of those three ahead of the early signing or during the early signing period here?
Yeah, so you mentioned Gompers, Cyrus, and who was the third star?
Matt Zollers. I think that one's the least likely. But is there anything positive you could tell Penn State fans?
On Zollers, I don't expect anything to happen there.
Yeah.
Gompers, surprisingly, it does seem that Duke is in a good spot to retain that.
Okay,
commitment.
Good for Duke. Good for them. Good for Manny Diaz.
I think Manny, offering Gompers a Duke and really showing that confidence in Gompers that he could be a big-time playmaker for them is gone far in that recruitment. It's because Manny has liked Gompers for a long time. I think Gompers has liked Manny for a long time. They didn't offer at Penn State, but he offered once he got to Duke. And I think that, of course, I'm blanking on the word right now, that has gone
right. No, yeah, that goes a long way. You invested in him as an unknown, underrated prospect, and now you reap what you sow.
Right. That's gone a long way. Their relationship has gone a long way, and Gompers is so far staying firm with the Blue Devils. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Good for him.
I haven't heard too much with him at Penn State, so if anything does materialize beyond Duke, I would probably have to lean Michigan. Okay. And then like Cyrus. Another one where it's been really quiet, but I don't think Penn State's going to stop until pen meets paper in a couple of weeks for the early signing period. South Carolina's got him on campus a few times since his Penn State visit, including this past weekend where Messiah Mickens was also visiting with him. I don't expect anything there with Mickens, by the way. But with Cyrus, definitely seems like South Carolina has taken back some of that momentum that Penn State was building. But there's still a couple of weeks until signing day. Cyrus is in Penn State's backyard, so I don't think that one is over by any means, but definitely one where South Carolina is doing a good job maintaining that commitment as well.
How about a second quarterback? Beckham Kritza is a long-term developmental prospect. He's one, and just being honest, he's ranked a little lower. He's not one of the headline quarterback prospects like a Drew Aller or an Ethan Grunkmeyer solidified in the top 10 here. He's on the outside looking in this case, and there was a time when Penn State was prospecting a second quarterback for this class of 2025. Are they still thinking out to 26, 27, or is there a chance that they, in a span of 2 weeks, try to flip somebody or add somebody to this class?
Yeah, Penn State's keeping their options open, I'd say, with a second quarterback to go along with Beckham Kritza. Okay. A couple guys that, they have been associated with is North Carolina quarterback commitment Bryce Baker. That one is going to be one to I would say put on the back burner if you're a Penn State fan for now. I don't think the only chance something happens there is if Mac Brown retires or if there's any sort of coaching change down there.
It's possible.
If that happens, then Bryce Baker maybe becomes in the fold. We just talked about Duke. They have been in contact with Duke quarterback commit Dan Mahon. for quite a while. They've actually, despite never offering him, they've been, talking to him since he was like a freshman, I think they told him. So there is a relationship there. Just haven't offered him yet. Not sure if that offer is ever going to happen. And then there's also obviously Carter Smith, who they've been kicking the tires on, but has quieted down since he decommitted from Michigan. They're amongst those teams initially that were brought up for him. But now it seems like that is potentially a Wisconsin, Florida State battle. Florida State just recently lost their commitment from Tramell Jones. So they have a quarterback opening. Smith is from Fort Myers, Florida. So that is something to watch there. So they have a couple guys out there that they're monitoring, but nothing that I would say right now I would point to being, this is a guy that we should definitely look at as being a number 2 quarterback in the class. If I'm a betting man, which I am, I'd probably bet on this still being a 1 quarterback class coming the early signing period. But never say never.
And that's why we ask you these questions, right? To gather that intel. I agree with you. I know that Penn State was at least looking around, having some conversations, but it doesn't sound like anything is going to materialize. Never say never, as you said, but most likely, more likely than not in this case. Let's finish up with this. The class of 2025, in my mind, is secure. Outside of what we just addressed with Chaz Coleman potentially going to Ohio State, the reason I didn't start off the segment with, Penn State's has to hold on to so-and-so, or they got to be aware of so-and-so, it's because they're probably going to have 25 commits that are going to sign here for the early signing period. There are no rumors. There aren't any players that are question marks. Penn State's really done a lot of work to get this class secured, and it's as solid as it gets. I think this class can finish as a top 10 class in terms of net results. It's going to be a consensus top 15 class across the board. But Penn State is in a really good position to be able to land everybody in 2 weeks here, pen to paper.
Yeah, I look at it right now, and things can change fast sometimes. But right now, I don't see anything that really concerns me in terms of this recruiting class and Penn State potentially losing any commitments beyond potentially Chaz Coleman with Ohio State, as we talked about. Beyond Coleman, everybody seems pretty firm in their commitment. Tyke Hayes committed, sent a tweet out a couple days ago saying that he was 100% locked in. Now, we saw the same out of Keandre Parker before that went opposite ways. But I think Penn State's in a good position to sign everybody here with signing day just around the corner.
Dylan, you also double with what you do at Penn State Rivals as an editor, as a recruiting insider. You also double as an expert on Minnesota, conveniently enough. So let's get that expert look at the Golden Gophers. Should Penn State look at this as a trap game? Are they on upset alert? I don't think so, but you might know better in this situation. We'll talk about Minnesota and get an inside look at Minnesota on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more than or less than on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And yes, you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So your lineups are going to stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and does not return, Prize Picks will keep your lineups alive. Do you think Saquon Barkley is going to go over 90 rushing yards? Do you think George Pickens is going to have more than 60 receiving yards? You can cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that is Prize Picks. Run your game. Dylan, when I look at this Penn State-Minnesota game, Penn State's the complete team. Top 10 defense, top 15 offense, statistically per the eye test. And then Minnesota, right? I think they're a respectable team. Top 25 defense in terms of stats, in terms of the way they force turnovers. They almost force 2 turnovers per game, 16 interceptions on the season, and it's not condensed to just 1 or 2 defensive backs. It's everybody's getting an interception. You get an interception. You get an interception. And this team collectively has forced 20 turnovers. But Penn State doesn't give up the turnover. And why I look at this matchup and say, oh, Penn State's going to win decisively, convincingly, in dominant fashion, is because Minnesota relies so heavily on the turnover in order to win these ball games. So what happens when they don't force those turnovers or don't force enough? I look at that offense. That's barely a top 100 offense. They're comparable to Purdue. They are just as bad as Purdue offensively, and they still get that many turnovers. So, Dylan, how do you approach this game? Does Minnesota have a chance at upsetting Penn State? I don't think so.
I would never say they don't have. I think, yeah, there's a very, very small chance that Minnesota could pull off this upset. Minnesota's a scrappy team. PJ Fleck's good coming off bye weeks for the most part. And that's a underratedly tough place to play in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, there's a chance. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I made my prediction on the on our podcast that went live on Wednesday, and I do have Penn State winning this game. But I think this could very well be a one-score game going into the fourth quarter. And if Penn State covers, I think they're going to cover with a late touchdown or 2 in the fourth quarter. I think this is going to be a close game for the most part. These are 2 pretty good defenses. I do think Penn State has the advantage. Penn State's advantage has the offense as the advantage over Minnesota's defense. But this Minnesota team is no pushover. I think they're going to put a better fight than Washington and Purdue did the last 2 weeks. And if they don't, I think a lot of that will be a credit to what Penn State likely did in this game to have another dominant victory. But I don't see the same recipe playing out this week for Penn State.
What are the X factors on Minnesota's side? Max Brosmer is a smart quarterback. He's well-traveled. He's a 6-year veteran. I like Darius Taylor a lot. I think and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a phone call in the offseason and gets, a little, hey, transfer portal, NIL deal, right? Okay, that's a long ways away. But that's how good Darius Taylor is, and I don't think he belongs at Minnesota much longer, is my point. When I look at both positive and negative X factors, and maybe you can cue in on the positive ones, the negative one that I'm looking at is Minnesota's offensive line. Traditionally, right, Wisconsin and Minnesota seem to be the schools that always have an excellent front 5. Well, that's not the case for Minnesota, and they have playmakers. Brosmer, respectable quarterback. Darius Taylor, superstar running back if you put him at another school. Good wide receivers, Daniel Jackson leading the way, good tight end, but they can't give Brosmer enough time to let the plays develop, wide receivers to get open, Darius Taylor to allowed to read the running lanes. So what can help Minnesota offset that? Maybe it is a total comprehensive defensive performance, which is what they've been doing all season, but is there another X factor that maybe we're not mentioning?
Yeah, you mentioned the 3 big ones. I think, Zach, Brosmer is a very good quarterback. He's been efficient this year. You look at the stats, very similar to Drew's stats this year. Efficient, takes care of the football, high IQ quarterback, processes the game really fast. Daniel Jackson's phenomenal wide receiver, has a future in the NFL. He had 800 yards last year, going to have 800 yards again this season. And then you look at Darius Taylor, and he's been great as well behind an offensive line that really can't block well for him. He's averaging 5 yards a carry about this season, despite some struggles on the offensive line. The offensive line struggles in run block and pass protection has been pretty good, only about 80 pressures on the season.
Okay.
And Pro Football Focus has only credited them with 13 of the 23 sacks. So I guess you could say that Brosmer does tend to take some bad sacks at times, but still he does a great job in the pocket. Another guy I think is worth mentioning, not necessarily a huge name, but is Elijah Spencer for Minnesota. Okay. He had, I think, 34 receptions this season for the Golden Gophers. Going off the top of my head there, 39 for 42 and 4 touchdowns. Big jump from where he was last year in his first year with the program. 9 receptions for 65 yards. But he's a guy who, as a freshman and sophomore at Charlotte, really flashed. Struggled in the transition from the group of 5 to the power 4 level last year, and now is really taking that next step this year. And he has a chance to be an NFL guy as well. But, those wide receivers going up against Penn State's secondary, I still like where Penn State is in that matchup. I wrote an article today on both sides about where Penn State and Minnesota have the advantages. Penn State, I give the advantage to on both sides of the ball in all aspects. Their run against Minnesota's run defense, their pass against Minnesota's pass defense, and vice versa. But those are the 4 guys on offense that really stands out to me. Offensive line, Ariante Irsay, their left tackle is phenomenal. Has a chance to be a first-round pick.
Abdul Carter right there. That's an awesome matchup.
Yeah, that'll be a great matchup to watch. So should be an interesting one on Saturday. I think it'll be intriguing to see how this Penn State passing attack does against a good but not great, or I should say good but not elite Minnesota secondary. They've had some clunkers, but for the most part, they do a pretty good job of keeping the ball in front of them, not allowing huge plays. But they have had, like I said, some clunkers this season. So it should be interesting. I expect a similar performance to maybe what Penn State's passing attack did against Washington to what could potentially transpire this weekend.
Well, and I also wonder, nobody can cover forever. So if Minnesota's secondary is left on an island and the pass rush doesn't get home, Penn State's offensive line has been progressing well in its pass blocking. So I think maybe that's a difference maker as well in this matchup. Dylan, that great intel, great insight, great analysis across the board when it comes to recruiting. But this matchup against Minnesota, Penn State's got to go 11-1 if they want to make the college football playoff. And this is the toughest matchup remaining. He is Dylan Callaghan-Croley, editor over at Penn State Rivals and recruiting insider as well. Dylan, thanks so much for the time. All of your work is going to be linked down in the description. And every time we get to chat about Penn State football, it's always a great conversation. Thank you again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Zach.
And again, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section about Penn State recruiting or Penn State versus Minnesota. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this episode. And if you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams and Penn State recruiting. Now, for your second listen and watch, check out Locked On Big Ten. Hosted by Craig Sheeman. He's putting the Big Ten first when everybody else overlooks it. And especially with these playoff conversations, that's certainly the case. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.